My name is Julia Crane, and I was raised in luxury, groomed to inherit a real estate empire, and trained to look the other way. But the moment I said no to my family's crimes, they decided I wasn't family anymore. Can you imagine being disowned by your parents in public, right in front of your coworkers, for choosing integrity? Just wait until you hear what they did next. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing all the places these stories reach. Now, here's how my fall from grace began. The air in my father's Dallas office felt colder than usual that morning, even with the Texas heat pressing against the high-rise windows. Maybe it was the way everyone went quiet when I walked in, folder in hand. Or maybe it was just instinct, some last whisper of warning before everything snapped. I dropped the manila folder onto the polished table like a gavel. 3 properties under false names, 2 ghost buyers, and forged permits with my signature. My voice didn't shake, even though my fingers twitched at my sides. I won't be part of your scams anymore. Henry Crane, my father mentor and now opponent, didn't even flinch. He leaned back in his leather chair, laced his fingers over his stomach, and smirked. You always had a flair for the dramatic, Jules. I hated when he called me that. Jules. Like I was still the obedient daughter who used to sit on his lap during board meetings and pretend to take notes. I wasn't that girl anymore. Across the room, my mother, Caroline, didn't bother to look up from her tablet. You'll regret this, she said, like she was commenting on the weather. I ignored her. You're defrauding investors. This is criminal. My father's chuckle was low and mocking. You think this is new? You've been cashing the checks, enjoying the lake house, driving the car. Don't act like you're suddenly above it all. I flushed. It was true, I had lived well, too well, but I'd never known the full extent. Not until last week when a junior accountant, barely out of college, confided in me with shaking hands about a set of double books. Once I saw them, I couldn't unsee them. This ends now, I said. Behind me, the glass door slid open with a hush. My sister Leela stepped in, leaning against the doorframe like she was watching a soap opera. She was older by just a year, but always made it feel like 10. Perfect Leela, with her designer wardrobe and venom-laced charm. Well, she said, flipping her glossy hair over one shoulder. That explains why the bank called this morning. What? I asked, my stomach dropping. She smiled sweetly. Dad told them to review your mortgage, said there were discrepancies. I guess your house isn't as solid as you thought. I turned to my father, heart pounding. You froze my accounts. If you're not with us, he said coolly, you're against us, and we don't bankroll enemies. I stared at him, waiting for a flicker of guilt, of hesitation. There was none, just a calm, practiced cruelty. You can't do this, I'm your daughter. Caroline finally looked up. Her eyes were hard, her voice colder than marble. Not anymore. And just like that, it was done. My own family, the ones who built me, had erased me with a few words and a flick of a pen. As I stood there, the folder still unopened, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't safe anymore, but I was free. And freedom, I realized, was worth the fire that was coming. I didn't even make it 24 hours before they showed me exactly what that meant. After that confrontation at the office, I drove home in a fog, replaying every word, every smirk on Leela's face. I kept thinking maybe I'd overreacted, that someone would call and tell me they didn't mean it. But no one called. And when I pulled into my driveway, I saw why. There it was, flapping slightly in the breeze like some smug little flag of war. An eviction notice. I stepped closer, reading it 3 times before my brain caught up to my eyes. It was real. My name typed neatly across the top, the words default of payment circled in red. As if I were some stranger who hadn't paid their bills. As if I hadn't spent the last 8 years helping grow that empire brick by brick. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone and called my bank. After 5 minutes on hold and 1 icy transfer to the fraud department, a woman informed me in the driest tone possible that my account was under temporary review. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Unusual activity flagged by a senior stakeholder, she said. You'll receive written notice in 10 business days. That senior stakeholder, my father. I could practically hear Leela laughing. I stumbled back into the house, the silence echoing like betrayal. Every corner felt colder, as if the walls already knew they didn't belong to me anymore. I barely had time to breathe before the second blow hit. My phone lit up with a notification from work. Urgent HR notice. Employment termination. I opened the email with shaking hands. Due to changes in our investor structure, your position has been dissolved effective immediately. We appreciate your contributions to the team. Investor structure. My father again. He was a silent partner in the tech firm I worked for, a detail I'd never paid attention to until now. I laughed, a hollow, stunned sort of laugh. My job, my house, my money, all gone, all in less than a day. The doorbell rang. For a foolish second, I thought maybe it was someone from the office coming to explain. Maybe Mason, the only coworker I really trusted. But when I opened the door, there was no sympathy standing there. Just Leela. My sister looked stunning, as always. A white linen blazer, perfect curls, red lipstick sharp as a blade. She held her phone up like she was documenting the moment. "Smile," she said. "First day of freedom." I didn't speak, I couldn't. "You should have stayed quiet, Jules," she added, stepping closer. "Played your role, kept your perks." She tilted her head. "But no, you had to play hero." I stared at her, every muscle in my body stiff with rage. "Why are you here?" Leela smiled. "To say goodbye and to enjoy the view." Then she turned, climbed into her luxury SUV and drove off, music blaring, tires whispering smugly over the pavement. That night I packed what I could. Just the essentials. Clothes, my laptop, an old photo of me and Grandma Margaret from when I was 10. She'd been the only one who ever looked at me with softness, who taught me how to read contracts before I was old enough to vote. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay here. Not with the walls crumbling around me and ghosts of luxury mocking every step. So I drove. Highway lights streaking past like questions I didn't want to answer. And somehow, without even planning to, I ended up 2 hours south, pulling into the overgrown driveway of my grandmother's abandoned cottage near Waco. It looked exactly like I remembered and nothing like it should have. Vines coiled around the porch rails. Shutters hung crooked over grimy windows. The front door groaned like it hadn't been opened in years, which, to be fair, it hadn't. I stepped inside, the air thick with mildew and silence. For a moment, I just stood there. No electricity, no signal, no heat, just stillness. And for the first time in hours, I let myself cry. Not quietly, not gracefully. I cried like the woman who had just lost everything and had no one to blame but the people who were supposed to love her most. Then I wiped my face, gathered some old quilts from a linen chest in the hall, and lit a fire in the cracked brick hearth. The flames danced weakly, warming only a corner of the room. I curled up there, wrapped in memories and wool and betrayal. "Just one night," I whispered into the smoke. "I'll figure it out tomorrow." But as the wind howled outside and the shadows stretched long across the walls, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house had been waiting for me, and something upstairs was waiting too. I didn't mean to fall asleep. Not really. But exhaustion hit like gravity, pulling me down into the dusty old sofa as the fire hissed and crackled its lullaby. The quilt smelled faintly of lavender and smoke, familiar, comforting in a way I hadn't felt in days. I told myself it would just be a few hours, one night to catch my breath, one quiet night before I figured out my next move. But sometime past midnight, I woke up coughing. The air had changed. Thick, sour. My lungs tightened as I sat up and realized the fireplace, my only source of heat, was no longer gently burning. It was roaring. Flames licked the mantel, blackening the stone. Smoke billowed up and out, curling into the rafters like hungry fingers. Panic shot through me. I grabbed the nearest quilt and tried to smother the flames, but it was too late. The fire wasn't spreading, it had already spread. Somewhere above me, wood crackled and groaned. I could hear it, the bones of the house shifting under heat. The front door wouldn't budge. Swollen with humidity or just plain old, I didn't know. I threw my weight against it, heart racing, vision blurred with smoke. Still stuck, I needed air. Light, escape. Instinct took over. I turned toward the back stairs, the narrow, rickety ones Grandma had warned me about when I was a kid. "Don't ever go up those without a flashlight, Jules, and never alone." But tonight I didn't have a choice. The attic. If I could get to the window up there, maybe. I choked, stumbling up each creaking step as heat pressed against my back. The smoke thickened, wrapping around me like a wet sheet. I reached the top, coughing hard, and pushed open the attic door with my shoulder. It gave way with a splintered groan. The space was dark, except for the flickering light bleeding through warped roof boards. I blinked against the haze, barely able to make out the shapes of boxes, trunks, a broken lamp. Everything covered in decades of dust. And then in the far corner, something caught my eye. A small chest, metal-lined wooden sides scorched slightly with age, marked with faded initials burned into the top. JC, my initials. But not mine. Margaret Crane, my grandmother. My heart thudded. I fell to my knees in front of it, hands fumbling at the rusted clasp. It popped open with a groan, revealing cash. A thick bundle held together with twine. Beneath it, a faded silk handkerchief embroidered with the letter M, and a yellowing envelope with nothing but an address scribbled across the front. A cemetery. Confused, I picked up the envelope, flipping it over in my hands. No letter, no explanation, just the location about 40 minutes from here. And nestled beside it, wrapped in oilcloth, a tiny brass key. What was this? Some kind of emergency stash. The house groaned violently beneath me, shaking me back into the present. Smoke poured in through the attic door now. The fire had found me. I shoved the cash and envelope into my coat pocket and scanned the space, eyes settling on the window, too small to crawl through. But just beside it, an access hatch to the overhang. A slim ledge, 3 stories up. I didn't think, I moved. Pushing the hatch open, I squinted against the wind as rain began to fall, gentle at first, then heavier, pattering against the scorched shingles. My shoes slipped on the mossy wood. My hands shook. "Grandma," I whispered, eyes locked on the overgrown yard below. "Help me!" And I jumped. I didn't feel the fall until I landed. 1 second I was airborne, suspended between fear and faith, and the next I was on the ground, soaked in rain, gasping for air. The impact rattled through my spine, knocking the wind out of me. Mud and wet grass smeared my palms as I rolled onto my side, coughing violently. But I was alive. Above me, flames bloomed against the black sky. The attic window glowed orange, then cracked and exploded outward, glass raining down like cruel confetti. The old house moaned, its beams surrendering one by one. I scrambled to my knees, shielding my head as another crash shook the air. The scent of smoke was everywhere, thick, acrid, permanent. Sirens wailed in the distance. I turned to look at the road, just in time to see the flashing red and white lights cutting through the dark like a salvation I wasn't sure I deserved. A fire truck screeched to a halt, followed by another. Shouts rang out, boots pounded, hoses uncoiled. "Ma'am, are you injured?" A firefighter shouted as he ran toward me, his reflective stripes flashing in the rain. I jumped from the attic, I managed between coughs. "There's no one else inside." He nodded, radioing in as another crew rushed toward the flames. Someone draped a blanket around my shoulders. Another set of hands helped me to my feet. I wobbled, knees weak, one ankle throbbing, but I didn't let go of the pocket where I'd shoved the envelope. It felt like the only solid thing left in the world. I watched the house, the one place that had once felt untouched by my family's lies, collapse in on itself. One final exhale of sparks before the roof gave way entirely. Gone, just like that. Was there anything valuable inside? A paramedic asked gently as she checked my pupils. I thought about the box, the initials, the envelope. I reached into my coat, pulling it out with trembling fingers. "This," I said. "It was hidden in the attic." She looked at it but didn't ask questions, just nodded. The officer on scene asked if I wanted to file a report, but I shook my head. "I don't think it was arson," I said. "I started a fire in the hearth. I fell asleep." Which was true, mostly, but something still felt off. The fire had moved too fast. The smoke had hit too hard. And that box, it had been placed, not forgotten. Tucked into the rafters, under old insulation, exactly where I'd find it if I ever came back. As the adrenaline faded, a new thought took root in my mind. One I couldn't shake. Grandma knew this would happen. She hadn't just left money. She left a trail, the cemetery address, the brass key. The silk handkerchief embroidered with M, it wasn't a goodbye. It was a beginning. As the paramedics cleared me, and I signed a waiver refusing hospital transport, I found myself standing alone at the edge of the property. Just me, the rain, and the smoldering bones of my grandmother's house. I looked back one last time. Then I limped toward my car, still clutching the envelope and the box of cash like a lifeline. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a message, and I was ready to receive it. The morning after the fire, I sat on the hood of my car, wrapped in the same smoke-scented blanket, staring at the address written in fading ink. A cemetery. The only clue my grandmother left, besides the cash that now felt less like an escape fund and more like a test. I didn't ask myself why I was going. I just drove. Through country roads and wet fields, past roadside churches and rusted fence lines. The sun was barely over the horizon when I pulled up to the cemetery gates, iron wrought and flanked by moss-covered stone pillars. Resthaven Memorial Gardens. I half expected to feel something when I stepped out, some pull, some sign, but all I got was the crisp morning air and the squish of wet leaves underfoot. There weren't many visitors, just rows and rows of silence. I found her grave near the back, under a willow tree that swayed like it remembered everything. Margaret Crane, beloved mother and grandmother. Not all inheritances are written in ink. I read the epitaph 3 times. The words weren't just poetic. Not with her. Margaret Crane didn't do poetic. She did layered, clever, intentional. She once taught me to solve riddles for pocket change at the breakfast table. She taught me how to cross-reference contracts by age 14 and solve puzzles most adults couldn't crack. I knelt down, brushing away leaves from the base of the headstone. Nothing else. No carvings, no secret drawers like in her desk. But that inscription, "Not all inheritances are written in ink," I murmured. Then how are they written? My fingers traced the cold stone, and then it hit me, the phrasing. It wasn't just poetic, it was familiar, a reference to something Margaret used to say during our little brain games. When I couldn't figure out the logic of a puzzle, she'd lean in and whisper, "Think beyond the page, Jules. Some truths hide between the lines." My eyes widened, between the lines. I sat back on my heels and read the inscription again, this time out loud, slowly. "Not all inheritances are written in ink." There, something in the rhythm, in the way she emphasized words when she used to speak. My grandmother's puzzles were always layered, sound, cadence, pattern, and then a name drifted up from memory. Kensley and Bloom. It wasn't just a name, it was the name of a law firm. One grandma had mentioned years ago, almost in passing, when I was still in high school. I remembered it because I thought it sounded like a brand of perfume. I pulled out my phone and searched it, hands still shaking. They were real, based in Dallas, small but long-standing, specializing in estates and private family contracts. A chill ran down my spine. What if this was what she meant? What if this was the real inheritance? I stood slowly, brushing off my jeans, heart pounding. I didn't know what I'd find at Kensley and Bloom, but I knew what I wouldn't find if I went back to my parents. Justice, truth, a name that meant something beyond the money they'd stolen. I looked back at her grave one more time, whispering, "I'm listening, Grandma." And then I got in the car. I hadn't planned to cry in a lawyer's office, but I wasn't prepared for what I was about to be handed either. The downtown office of Kensley and Bloom didn't look like the kind of place where secrets lived. Pale blue walls, polished floors, quiet professionalism humming in the background. But the moment I stepped inside and whispered my grandmother's name, everything changed. Amanda Royce was younger than I expected, not the gray-haired man I had imagined holding dusty documents. She had sharp hazel eyes and a voice that sounded like she read people before they ever spoke. "You're Julia Crane," she said as we sat across from one another. "We've been expecting you, for years, in fact." I blinked. "Excuse me." She stood, walked to a locked file cabinet behind her desk, and pulled out a narrow metal drawer. From it, she withdrew a thick envelope sealed in crimson wax. The initials MC were stamped dead center. "This was left in our possession by Margaret Crane," Amanda explained, "under strict instruction. To be opened only by you and only when you arrived with the contents of a certain box." She nodded toward the bag in my lap, the smoke-scented satchel still cradling the metal chest I'd found in the attic. "I assume you have it." I unzipped the bag and lifted the chest. She barely glanced at it before returning her attention to the envelope. "If you're ready," she said, sliding it across the table, "we can begin." My fingers hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside were several items: a handwritten letter, a notarized document labeled Executor Override, a legal addendum marked Revoked Transfer of Ownership, and a final file with the heading Alternate Will. I didn't understand most of the legal language, but I didn't need to. The letter spoke louder than anything else. Julia, if you're reading this, then they've finally shown you who they really are. And now it's time I show you who you really are, too. I gave the business to your father under pressure. Not because he earned it, not because he deserved it, but because at the time I feared what would happen if I didn't. I hoped he might grow into it. He didn't, so I prepared this instead. Quietly, legally, authentically. You are the rightful heir to the Crane portfolio, its assets, holdings, and the legacy I began. I only regret not protecting you sooner, but I believe in your strength. If you're holding this now, it means you've already survived what they threw at you. Now it's time to take back what's yours. With love, Grandma Margaret. I set the letter down, hands trembling. Amanda let me have the moment. When I finally looked up, my voice came out as a whisper. This is legal. Yes, she said calmly. Your grandmother worked with our founding partners to construct an alternate estate strategy. It revokes the asset transfer to your parents, identifies coercion through financial documentation, and names you, clearly and singularly, as the intended beneficiary. So, I own Crane Developments. Not yet, Amanda clarified. But this gives you the power to challenge the current ownership. The will can be activated upon judicial filing. With it, you can initiate a legal reclamation of the company and its holdings. And depending on how aggressively you want to pursue it, we can include restitution claims for wrongful seizure of personal assets. She paused. And fraud. I let that word hang in the air. Fraud. The very thing I'd refused to be part of. This is going to be messy, I said quietly. Amanda nodded. It always is when you expose family secrets. But she prepared for this, all of this. She knew your father's greed, and she suspected your mother's silence would be complicit. She trusted you to fight back when the time came. Something inside me tightened. Not in fear, in clarity. I hadn't walked away from my family empire. I'd been exiled from it. But now I was walking back with something stronger than their threats. Truth. I want to move forward, I said, my voice firmer now. File the will, begin proceedings. Amanda offered the smallest smile. Then we begin today. She slid a stack of papers across the desk and handed me a pen. By the time I signed the final page, I wasn't the broken daughter they'd left with nothing. I was the woman they never saw coming. I didn't knock. I wanted them to feel it. The suddenness, the shift, the moment when the daughter they tried to erase stepped over their threshold not as family, but as a legal threat. The sitting room hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Same ornate furniture, same cold marble floors, same oil paintings of ancestors who looked like they'd sue you if you blinked wrong. But now it felt smaller, almost laughable in its grandeur, like a stage set that had fooled me for far too long. Caroline sat perched on the edge of her cream velvet chaise, a teacup balanced in one hand like she'd been born to pretend. Leela lounged in the corner, legs crossed, phone in hand, deliberately ignoring me. And Henry, my father, was pacing by the fireplace, checking something on his watch. It was Leela who noticed me first. Well, she drawled, look who found her way back from the ashes. I stepped farther into the room, heart steady. Hello, Leela. Henry turned, surprise flashing across his face. Julia, this isn't a good time. I'm not here for tea, I said, and I won't take long. Caroline's cup paused midair. What do you want? To let you know I've filed suit, I said simply. Effective tomorrow morning, you'll be receiving formal notice from my attorney. The silence was immediate, heavy, delicious. Henry narrowed his eyes. Suit for what? Fraud, I said. Asset theft, attempted financial coercion, and violation of my rights as the named beneficiary of Margaret Crane's estate. Caroline blinked. That will was revoked. Henry has had control for years. Correction, I said, pulling a copy from my folder and laying it gently on the table. The transfer was made under duress, and Margaret left behind a second will dated and witnessed by independent counsel naming me as the rightful heir. Henry's face lost all color. Caroline stood abruptly. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, I said. I found her sealed executor file. Amanda Royce is representing me. The paperwork is already in motion. You're going to drag this family through the mud, Caroline snapped. I stared at her. You already did that when you destroyed my credit, stole my job, and tried to leave me with nothing. You burned the bridge and thought I wouldn't swim back across the river. Leela laughed, dry and slow. You think this changes anything. You'll never win, not against us. I turned to her. You were always good at being underestimated, weren't you? What's that supposed to mean? It means I see you now, all of you, the game playing, the sabotage, calling to laugh while my life collapsed. That was cute. Her eyes narrowed. It wasn't personal. Really, I said. Then why did you sabotage me at work? She didn't answer. Henry stepped forward. You'll ruin us all if you go through with this. No, I said. You did that when you made me choose between crime and exile. I didn't ruin the family, Dad. You did. The moment you weaponized loyalty against me. His jaw clenched. You don't understand how this works. I understand enough, I replied. Enough to know the law's finally on my side. I turned toward the door, letting the silence work like a blade. Just before I left, I said one last thing. You underestimated the wrong Crane. And then I walked out, not a daughter, not a victim, not a pawn, but a storm they never saw coming. The invitation came in a pale blue envelope, sealed with wax. Like something out of a Jane Austen novel. Let's talk like family, it said in my mother's handwriting. Dinner, 7 p.m. Wednesday. We want peace. It should have felt suspicious. But after weeks of court filings, legal back and forth, and icy silence, I let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe they'd come to their senses. Maybe this dinner was a white flag. Maybe they wanted to end it quietly. I wore black. A silent reminder that something had already died between us. Their mansion gleamed as always, trimmed hedges, stone lions at the gate, the whole facade intact like they hadn't tried to erase me from it. Caroline greeted me at the door with a glass of champagne. You look tired, Julia, she said sweetly. Litigation doesn't seem to suit your complexion. Neither does betrayal, I said, brushing past her into the foyer. Henry was already seated at the head of the long dining table, napkin folded crisply in his lap. Leela, in red, gave me a smirk as she poured herself a second glass of wine. I sat where the butler indicated, 3 seats away from everyone else like I carried contagion. The first course arrived. Light salad, cold smiles. We didn't invite you here to fight, Caroline began after a few awkward bites. There's still time to stop this nonsense. This nonsense is a legal correction, I said carefully. Henry set his fork down. You're hurting our name. You already did that, I replied. I'm just dragging it into the light. Leela rolled her eyes. So dramatic. I learned from the best, I said. The whole family's been performing for years. Silence. Then came the main course, roast duck, glazed carrots, and a pear-end walnut tart for dessert. I didn't eat much. The food sat strangely on the plate, elegant and off-putting, but I did take a bite of the tart. Sweet, delicate, with a familiar flavor. My throat tightened. Not from emotion, from something else. I coughed once. Then again. My breath stuttered. Are you all right? Caroline asked, her voice calm, almost amused. I stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Leela's brows lifted, but her mouth twitched. Problem? My heart was pounding, my vision blurred, my lips tingled, my chest constricted. I knew this feeling. Did you? I gasped, hand clutching the table. Then darkness. I woke in a cold hospital room, white sheets, sterile light. A nurse hovered above me. You're lucky you got here in time, she said. Severe anaphylactic reaction. Do you have a nut allergy? Yes, I croaked. Walnuts. The nurse nodded. The paramedic said it was in the dessert. I didn't respond, because I couldn't yet, because the dessert had been made for me. Later that night, I opened my eyes to see a familiar silhouette in the doorway, Leela, holding a paper bag and wearing an expression of theatrical concern. Oh my God, she said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. I came as soon as I heard. I can't believe Mom used nuts. She forgot, I guess. Forgot? She had mocked my allergy in high school. Threatened to slip almond extract into smoothies just to watch me panic. I saw right through her. They tried to kill me. And now they were trying to clean it up with carefully placed lies and poisoned apologies. She placed the bag on the table. Clothes for you. I figured you didn't want to leave in that awful gown. Thanks, I whispered. Leela tilted her head, studying me. You know, she added, stepping closer, Maybe this lawsuit is making everyone a little too emotional. Maybe you should back off before someone gets really hurt. There it was, the mask slipping. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just stared. Because in that moment, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. She should have been afraid of me. The morning sunlight felt too bright for a hospital room, too normal for what had just happened. I sat up slowly, my throat raw, my mind racing. Every replay of last night ended in the same truth. Someone had put walnuts in that tart. Someone who knew exactly what would happen. And that someone had smiled while watching me eat it. My phone buzzed on the side table. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." "Hey," came a warm, familiar voice. Mason, my former coworker, one of the few who hadn't disappeared when my father turned everyone against me. "You okay? I saw the news alert, something about you collapsing." I closed my eyes. "I'm fine now. I guess my family thought dinner should come with an aftertaste of revenge." He didn't laugh. "Julia, I went by your parents' place this morning to grab your car. I thought you'd need it when you got discharged." I frowned. "Okay, and—" "Well," he said carefully, "something's off. The brake lights weren't working, so I took it to the shop before driving it over here." A pause. "Mason," I said slowly, "what did they find?" He exhaled sharply. "The mechanic said the brake lines were cut." The words didn't even land right away. They hovered in the air between us like a ghost. Then it hit me all at once. "Cut, not worn, not leaking. Cut." "Mason," I whispered, "you're sure?" "Positive. He said whoever did it knew what they were doing. The car would have gone straight through the first stop sign." I pressed a shaking hand to my forehead. "Oh my God." "Julia, you can't go near them again," he said. "Promise me you'll stay somewhere safe." I let out a dry laugh. "Safe doesn't exist for me anymore, but thank you for checking the car, for believing me." "You should tell your lawyer," he urged. "That's evidence." I nodded even though he couldn't see it. "I will." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring out the window at a world that looked insultingly calm. People walking dogs, kids on bikes, coffee cups. Life going on. Meanwhile, mine was being hunted by the people who shared my blood. They hadn't just wanted to ruin me, they wanted to erase me. First the eviction, then the job, then the house fire, now the dinner, the car. It was all connected and I could feel the threads tightening around me, but something shifted inside me then. The fear, the shock, it started to melt into something colder, sharper, resolve. If they wanted to bury me, they should have made sure I didn't learn how to dig. I called Amanda next. She answered on the first ring. "Julia, how are you holding up?" "Alive," I said. "Barely." Her tone sharpened. "What happened?" "They tried again," I said flatly. "Dinner at the house, dessert laced with walnuts, and now my car." Mason found the brake lines cut. There was silence, then the rustle of papers. "We'll add both incidents to the record," she said. "This changes the case. Attempted harm turns civil fraud into potential criminal charges." "Good," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Because I'm done playing nice." "Julia." "No," I interrupted. "No more mercy. They wanted to kill me to keep their empire. Now I'll make sure the world knows exactly who they are." Amanda hesitated. "That means going public, press involvement, courtroom exposure." "I don't care," I said. "They burned my life to the ground. The least I can do is light a match under their lies." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Amanda said quietly, "Your grandmother would be proud." I hung up and leaned back against the pillow, exhaling slowly. My heart still raced, but it wasn't panic anymore. It was anticipation. A strange, fierce calm. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that office weeks ago, slamming a folder on a table. That woman had something to lose. This one didn't. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Rows of pew-like benches. A judge's bench that towered high above. Pale wood paneling that looked like it belonged in a cathedral, not the place where my family's legacy was about to go up in flames. I sat next to Amanda, hands folded, spine straight. My palms were dry, no nerves left, just purpose. Across the aisle sat Henry and Caroline, flanked by a legal team so polished they looked pre-dusted. Leela wasn't beside them, not yet, but I'd heard the whispers. She'd be called as a witness, and possibly as a co-conspirator. The bailiff called the court to order. Amanda stood first. She walked the court through everything. Margaret Crane's alternate will, the sealed executor letter, the chain of evidence linking back to the coerced transfer of assets. Then she presented the more recent details, my frozen accounts, the suspicious firing, and the property repossession, all linked back to my father's influence in the bank and tech firm. Then she pulled out the big guns. "Your Honor," Amanda said, sliding a USB drive onto the evidence tray, "we have documentation that points to clear, orchestrated efforts to eliminate the plaintiff both financially and physically." "Physically?" the judge asked, eyebrows raised. "Yes, Your Honor, attempted harm twice. The first by way of an allergic reaction triggered during a meal at the defendant's home, and the second involving vehicular sabotage." I locked eyes with Henry as she said it. He didn't flinch, but Caroline stiffened. And Leela, now sitting behind them, looked away. The judge nodded. "Proceed with evidence." Amanda pulled up surveillance footage, one from my former townhouse, showing Caroline's personal assistant posting the eviction notice. Another clip from the catering kitchen the night of the dinner, showing Leela inspecting the plated desserts with the chef, seconds before the tarts were served. But the footage that made the courtroom stir, the security cam from the mechanic's shop, showing my car being towed in. The report read aloud. "Brake lines severed using a precision tool, not natural wear, deliberate tampering." I didn't blink. I let the weight of it land where it needed to. Henry's lawyer stood up, trying to argue the will was outdated, that Grandma had been confused in her final years. Amanda calmly presented medical records proving Margaret was of sound mind and body at the time of signing. Then came Henry's outburst. "You're destroying the family." He shouted across the aisle, rising from his seat. The judge slammed the gavel once. "Mr. Crane, you will control yourself." But I stood and I spoke. "I'm not destroying anything," I said, voice strong, steady. "You did that when you stole what didn't belong to you, when you blacklisted me, when you tried to erase me." Henry's lips curled. "You're just bitter, spoiled." I took a step forward. "I'm still breathing. After what you did, that's something. But let's be clear. I'm not here because I want revenge. I'm here because I survived. And I won't let you get away with burying me alive." You could hear a pin drop. Even Leela didn't smirk this time. Amanda calmly resumed, showing phone records, the notarized will, and testimony from the estate's original paralegal, confirming Margaret's intention to pass the company on to me, not Henry. The final nail. Audio from a recorded phone call between Caroline and a private investigator, discussing ways to get Julia out of the picture quietly. The judge recessed for deliberation. When he returned, the verdict was swift. The court recognizes the alternate will of Margaret Crane as valid and legally binding. Full ownership of Crane Developments will be restored to Julia Crane. In addition, the court recommends the district attorney review evidence related to the plaintiff's claims of attempted harm for potential criminal proceedings. Henry's mouth fell open. Caroline blinked like the wind had been knocked out of her. Leela was gone, already walked out. I stood slowly as the gavel fell. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just breathed. And outside the courthouse, with reporters crowding around and cameras flashing, I gave them the truth they were all asking for. "I didn't burn that house down," I said calmly. "But from the ashes, I rose." The reporters were still outside when I left the courthouse, their voices a storm of questions. "Julia, what will you do with the company now? Did you know your sister might be indicted too? Do you consider this justice?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I walked down the steps slowly, each one steadier than the last. In my hand was the court's official ruling, signed, stamped, final. It felt like the weight of the world had been lifted, only to reveal a new one entirely. Ownership, control, legacy. Crane Developments was mine now, not the corrupted shell my father had turned it into, but the vision my grandmother had built from nothing. And I knew what I had to do. I stopped at the bottom of the steps, turned to face the press, and finally spoke. "This verdict isn't about revenge," I said into the sea of microphones. "It's about restoration." Margaret Crane left behind a legacy that was stolen, twisted, and weaponized. Today I took it back, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been cut out of their own story. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted more questions. I smiled once, then walked away. I didn't need their headlines. I was already writing my own. That night I sat in the conference room of Crane Developments, my conference room, staring at the mahogany table that had once felt like a battleground. It was quiet now. Fake gloss had been stripped away, and beneath it I could finally see what Grandma saw when she built this place, not power but purpose. Amanda sat across from me, tired but smiling. "They're talking about an indictment for your parents, felony counts, and Leela's been named in the vehicular sabotage." I nodded. She always wanted to be included in something. Amanda arched an eyebrow. "You want me to push for full charges?" "I want what's fair," I said. "No more, no less." She studied me. "You're different now." "I had to be," I said. "They made sure of that." We packed up in silence, the kind that comes after a war not peaceful but earned. On my way out, I paused at the door. The same door I had once slammed shut when I walked away from everything. I turned back and whispered, "Not anymore." The next morning, headlines were everywhere. Heiress Julia Crane reclaims Empire family fraud case ends in courtroom twist from disowned to CEO. The Crane comeback, but the only thing that mattered was the email from Margaret's former assistant. Attached was an old voicemail I'd never heard. My grandmother's voice, crackling with age but still sharp. "Jules, if you ever find this, I hope you remember who you are. Not just a Crane, a builder, a survivor. A woman who knows how to rise without burning everything down. That's the legacy I leave you, not the business, not the money, just the truth." I listened to it 3 times before saving it in 3 different folders. She'd always known. And now the world would too. 6 months later, I stood in the glass atrium of the newly rebranded company, holding a champagne flute in one hand and a microphone in the other. The building had changed. The name on the entrance now read, Crane Legacy Group, not Developments, not Holdings, not some cold, transactional title meant to intimidate investors. Legacy. Because what Grandma started wasn't just real estate, it was generational. It was personal. The crowd gathered was small by design. No media, no cameras, just the people who mattered. Amanda, standing at my side, sipping champagne and exchanging quiet laughs with one of our legal interns. Mason, dressed in his best blazer, talking to our new security consultant. He'd declined a formal role but agreed to help vet every vendor, every contract, every door lock in this place. After what happened, we didn't take safety for granted anymore. And around them, my new team. The ones I'd hired not for their pedigree or connections, but for their grit. People who'd survived layoffs, burnouts, glass ceilings. People who knew what it felt like to rebuild something from pieces. I tapped the mic gently. "Thank you all for coming," I said, scanning the room. Some of you knew this company under a different name. Some of you knew it only as the shadow of something broken. But today, we begin again. The atrium was so quiet, I could hear the soft fizz of the champagne bubbles. When I was a child, my grandmother taught me that legacy wasn't about what you left behind, it was about what you stood for while you were still here. She stood for hard work, fair deals, and above all, for building something that outlived her. I paused, my voice steady. Crane Legacy Group will be guided by those same principles. We will operate transparently, hire ethically, and invest in communities, not just properties. This company doesn't exist because of bloodlines or boardroom battles. It exists because of survival. Because when everything burned, something stronger was forged. A ripple of quiet applause moved through the room. I smiled. Family isn't who shares your name, it's who shows up when you have nothing left. And today, I want to thank those who stood beside me when I had only ashes in my hands. I turned to Amanda. To the lawyer who believed I had a case when everyone else thought I was just a girl with a grudge. I looked to Mason. To the friend who checked my brakes, not because I asked, but because he never stopped watching out for me. And then to the staff. To every person who said yes when I asked, "Will you help me build something better?" I raised my glass. To real family, I said. The kind you make, not the kind you're born into. May this company honor the truth of our past and the promise of something greater. We toasted. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a builder, just like Margaret. As the music started and conversations resumed, I stood by the window overlooking the city. The skyline stretched wide, full of possibilities, clean lines, fresh starts. Someone approached me. A new hire, Carmen, whose resume had been buried by 3 other companies before we found it. She smiled. "So what's next, boss?" I smiled back. "Now," I said, "we rise on purpose." The grass was a little taller than I remembered, the wind a little softer. I parked just outside the iron gates of the cemetery near Waco, the same place where I'd knelt months ago with a cryptic epitaph echoing in my head. Only this time I wasn't alone. My daughter, 2 years old, bright-eyed, fearless, toddled beside me, clutching a daisy in one hand and my fingers in the other. "Where we going, Mama?" she asked. "To say thank you," I said gently. She didn't understand, not yet, but she would. We walked the narrow path past crumbling headstones and weather-worn angels until we reached the one I knew by heart, Margaret Crane, beloved mother, unbreakable matriarch. Not all inheritances are written in ink. I knelt beside it again, just like I had that night when I was freezing and lost and still unsure if the box I'd found was a gift or a goodbye. Now I knew it was both. My daughter sat in the grass beside me, laying her flower carefully at the base of the stone. "She saved us both," I said softly, "not just from poverty or injustice or betrayal, from erasure, from living a life that wasn't truly ours." I traced the engraving with my fingers. My daughter tugged at my sleeve. "Was she like you?" I smiled. "No, I'm like her." She giggled and wandered a few steps away, picking dandelions, humming to herself, the way children do when they feel safe, when they know the ground beneath them is steady. And that's when I realized this was it. Not the courtroom victory, not the new title, not even the glass office with my name etched on the door. This was justice. A life not built on silence or survival, but choice. The ability to return to the start, head held high, with something more precious than vengeance. Peace. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. "I kept my promise," I said to the stone. "I took it back, I made it better, and I made sure your name still means something." The wind stirred the leaves around us, a rustle, a hush, almost like she was there, nodding. Before we left, I looked down at my daughter one more time. "One day," I told her, "you'll hear this whole story, about what they tried to take from us, and what we rebuilt from the wreckage." She looked up at me, squinting into the sun. "Will I be brave like you?" I knelt and kissed her forehead. "You already are." We walked back to the car hand in hand, the headstone shrinking in the distance but never out of sight. And as we drove off, I realized the final truth. Dignity, once stolen, can be fought for. Justice, once denied, can be won. And legacy, the kind that endures, isn't just inherited, it's earned.